Hi all, if you are a returning viewer, welcome back. If you are new, welcome. My name is Amira, and today guys, we are going to be talking about this baby, the new Mothership 11 Sunlit Seduction from Mother Pat. I am wearing it on my eyes now. I have thoughts. Let's get into it. And again, my disclaimer, my window is open, my fan is on, it's 90 degrees. That's all I'm gonna say. All right. This is what she looks like, the standard packaging. This is what the inside looks like. This is the outside packaging, very pretty, her standard pretty packaging that we all love. All right. I have thoughts, guys. So I'm a little late getting my video out. I recognize that. I know everybody and their mother got this palette. I got it around the same time. I just didn't have time to film. So for me, I didn't want to do a demo. I felt like you guys have probably seen a million people do a look that is very similar to this look, because that's what I've seen. And there isn't a lot of variation to find with this color story as far as the looks that you do. Like I used all the same. I used, you know, the red that, you know, everyone is using. I used the brown, I used these shades, I used, I used almost every color in here except this gold. So yeah, so this is the look I created. It's beautiful. I didn't have any issues with this palette. I know some people have stated that they feel like this isn't her normal formula and that it doesn't have special shades. It does have special shades in it. I don't quite get why people are saying it doesn't have special shades. It does. What it doesn't have, and maybe this is the difference that they are talking about, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later on. The difference is that the 4 shades that would normally be her special shades are not her baked formula. They are standard pressed shades. However, they still have a ton of dimension. They're super sparkly. I will swatch them on my hand, my fingers here for you guys so you can see what I'm talking about. But they have dimension to them, and they are super sparkly. And of course I did this and didn't bring a piece of anything to wipe my hands off with. They are super sparkly, but they're not the same formulation. They're not as dry to the touch. One thing I think, if you've ever touched a Mothership, the special shades in a Mothership, you know that those shadows, which are sort of like a baked gelée formula, are incredibly dry to the touch and very glittery. These have a bit more body to them. They remind me a lot of the formula that she used in that little holiday quad that she had. That was like the cool toned one that I did a review on, and there is a formulation in there that she had never used in any of her other palettes, like specifically the Motherships, and I was very impressed by that palette and that particular formula. And I feel like these are actually just a play on that formula in different tones. So those are my thoughts on that. I don't have issues with these shadows. I will preface by saying, I know a lot of people sort of buy Motherships for the special shades. That has never been my main reason for buying Motherships. So for me, when people are like, oh, it doesn't have special shades, it doesn't have special shades, that isn't a deterrent for me necessarily like it may be for someone else. If that is what you are purchasing her palettes for, and you're specifically going for that baked gelée formula, that is not in this palette. So if you were interested in this but you weren't sure, the shades are special, but they're not special in that way. They're not special in that formulation, if that makes sense. But again, this is a formula that she's only done once before, and that was in, at least to my knowledge, and that was in the 5-pan palette that she had for holiday. So what I wanted to get into with you guys is, besides just talking about this palette and the way that it's been received, which has been, people were underwhelmed. I myself was incredibly underwhelmed. We've seen this color story from Pat a million times at this point in various iterations. I think we're all sort of hungering for a little bit more from her. I am someone who, I own all of the Motherships. I have collected them. I have been a Pat collector for a very long time. I don't collect as much as I used to now. I'm mostly, if I'm going to collect, it's probably going to be the motherships more than anything else. But I feel like the artistry and the creativity that was the edge that it had at the brand and that she had at the beginning of the start of the brand has become watered down quite a bit, and she's veering into very much Charlotte Tilbury territory with a lot of her releases lately, which, I mean, Charlotte Tilbury, I don't have any issues. It's a very specific aesthetic, but that's never really been the aesthetic of Pat McGrath Labs. And so for me, and for those of us who are OG Pat fans and who have spent a lot of money over the years, that's not really what we were down for. That's not really what we were purchasing for. Like, if I wanted Charlotte Tilbury, I'd buy Charlotte Tilbury. You know what I mean? I do think that Pat's quality, as far as her eyeshadows go, is better than Charlotte Tilbury's. And I've tried Charlotte Tilbury palettes. I own 2 palettes from Charlotte Tilbury. I don't think it's bad quality, but it's not Pat quality. Now, this palette specifically, a lot of people are like, it's not the same quality. It's not the same quality. It is. Now, what isn't up to snuff as far as quality goes is the eyeshadow primer that she released at the same time. I bought the kit. I bought the kit that included the palette and the Intensifies primer. I used the primer before I used the palette. I used the primer for the past, I've been using the primer for the past week with all of my other eyeshadows. And I wanted to see how it performed just in general. If you're just in the market for an eyeshadow, an eyeshadow primer, not necessarily if you just want to use it specifically for a mothership, because I know that that's not really how we, people use makeup realistically. If you're buying an eyeshadow primer, you're probably going to use it with all of your eyeshadows. So I really wanted to see how it performed with formulas that were not hers. And I have to say, it did not perform well. I think that formula has a tiny bit too much emollient to it. And I noticed that when I was putting it on my eye. I felt if it had a bit of, I tend to like a drier eyeshadow primer formula. I use the About Face Beauty. That's the one that I've been using pretty much since I got it. Well, I take that back. I didn't use it for a while and then I started using it. So I've been using it for a good while, like almost a year now. And mine is almost done, which is why I was interested in trying Pat's. I have to say, her formulation, it just has it dries down, but I feel like it has a little too much slip to it. I could feel it when I was rubbing it in, when I was applying it, that I could feel the silicones in it. And what I found is that when I'd apply it and I'd wear my, I work long hours. I work 9.5, 10-hour days sometimes. I put my makeup on, and for me, with my normal primer, my eyeshadow doesn't really budge. That's not an issue for me normally. What I noticed over these past few days since I started using that primer is that I'd come home and my eyeshadow had broken down. Now, I didn't just notice it when I came home. I was noticing it throughout the day. I'd go to the restroom in my office, I'd look at my eyeshadow, and it just wouldn't look as vibrant as it had looked, or as pigmented as it had looked when I first applied it. And that's, again, not usually something that I deal with. That's not usually an issue for me. I have oily lids, or I don't have dry lids, I'll put it that way, during the summer. During the winter months I do, because I deal with eczema and things like that on my eyelids during the cooler months. But during the summer, not really. But my eyeshadow primer has always been able to hold up to whatever's going on with my eyelids. This one did not. And I'm wondering if that is the issue that some people are experiencing. I know that a couple of people, I didn't watch her full video, but I noticed that Morgan Turner talked about the eyeshadow fading on her eyelids, and I wonder if she used the primer, because I'm assuming that, like a lot of other YouTubers, she came out with a new product, we wanted to try it, and I'm wondering if that was the issue, because what I found for every single day that I used that eyeshadow primer, my eyeshadow did not last. So today I did my makeup and I used my normal eyeshadow primer, and my eyeshadow looks great. I don't know how, I think it'll wear fine. I found that the formulation of this palette was just as comparable as the last 3 that she's come out with, or 2 that she's come out with. So Utopian Dreams, Moonlight Seduction. The vibe is very similar as far as the texture of the mattes, how they blend. I didn't have any issues blending. I don't have issues blending Pat McGrath palettes, or eyeshadows, excuse me, very much anyway. I think the only one that I maybe had an issue with was the holiday release that she came out with, the bigger palette. And I know some people had issues with the bright colors. I actually didn't have any issues with the bright colors. I had issues with the neutral tones. The neutral tones in that palette were not good, and I actually thought the colorful shadows were the better of the palette itself. The colorful shadows were the easier ones to blend, in my experience. Now, let's talk comparisons. I have all of the palettes that I think are comparable to Sunlit Seduction. So this is Sunlit Seduction. I'll show it to you one more time. This is what she looks like. I have to say, I will say this, guys, when I opened this up, I wasn't like, ooh, I really wasn't. I bought this for science. If I was not a YouTuber, if I was not a pet collector in that way, I probably would have skipped it. Not, to be quite honest, it's not a color story that excited me. It doesn't excite me when I see it. She had that whole thing where it was like accidentally released on her website, which a lot of people said that was on purpose. I tend to agree. I think she was trying to drum up excitement for the palette because it was released by accident and people got a discount and it was this whole thing. I think it was a way to drum up excitement for a palette that most people were not excited for. I'll say that. So let's start off with Utopian Dreams. So here is Utopian Dreams. Now, this is Sunlit Seduction. This is Utopian Dreams. They both have a purple, I will say that. This one is less purple, and it's not the baked gelée formula, so I'll show you what they look like. So this is the Utopian Dreams purple, and this is the purple from Sunlit Seduction. And I will also show you, you can see here that the special shades here are that, I'll flip it that way so you can kind of see, are that baked gelée formula. You can kind of see the texture there. So these are baked into the pan, where these are just standard shadows that are pressed into the pan. So these are actually like, how do I put it? Not baked into the pan, but baked into the palette. So there is no like pan in these. These are baked into the palette. Whereas these are in standard eyeshadow pans. So are these. So I think this is when people get into the like, are they special? This is kind of what they're talking about. You then have this shade here that is, it's called Hypnotic Bronze. And I'm going to show you the comparable shade from Utopian Dreams. I'm going to make sure I get the names right. I suck at remembering Pat's names for her palettes because there's so much. So then there is Bronze Desire. So this is Bronze Desire from Utopian Dreams, and this is Hypnotic Bronze. And I will swatch them on my hands. So, Hypnotic Bronze. Bronze, what's it called? Bronze Desire. So, there you go. Both bronzy. Very pretty. They don't look super similar when you swatch them, but in the pan, they look very similar. But as you can see, not that similar. Now, the question then becomes, does it matter when you put them on your eye? That becomes the question. You then have this shade that is called Sienna Mystique. From the Sunlit Seduction, and then you have the shade, I think this is called, Secret Eden. So this is Secret Eden from Utopian Dream, and then this is the shade from, that's a terrible swatch, from Sunlit Seduction. So these shades are very sort of, if I'm looking at this palette, these are the shades that are comparable to each other. Do you see that? So very similar, very similar. Do you need both? Is the question. I can't answer that for you. You will have to answer that yourself. Then you have Skin Show Nude Ecstasy, which is the sort of like super light shade that's always at the beginning of the palette. And then you have Skin Tone Radiance, I think, or Skin Tense Radiance, excuse me. I don't have my glasses on right now. I might put my glasses on. I will say that this one from Sunlit Seduction is brighter, but not by much. It's got a little bit more reflect, but not a ton. I use that a little bit here on my brow bone. But like, would you be able to tell the difference? Again, if someone said it was, you know, like, would you be able to tell the difference on the eye? No. Let's also do the browns in this. She's always got a brown. So we're going to do Extreme Plum Noir, which is more like a plummy brown. And then we're going to do Extreme Vermilion Dusk, which is the shade from Sunlit Seduction. So, Sunlit Seduction, Utopian Dreams. Now, one thing I will say when I'm swatching these side by side, these mattes, is that I will say that I do feel like the mattes that are in the Utopian Dreams palette are a tad creamier. Just a bit, not a ton, but the ones in Sunlit Seduction are just a tad more dry. Like, when I picked it up, I had a little bit more kickback on my finger, but again, nothing wild and crazy. Okay, so that is Utopian Dream, and those are the shades that I feel are the most similar of those two palettes. Next, let's do its sister palette. Let's do Moonlit Seduction, okay? And this was the 10th palette. This is what it looks like. This is really the cool tone sister of this one. So this is Sunlit Seduction. This is Moonlit Seduction. Sunlit, Moonlit. If I had to choose between these, I would prefer Moonlit Seduction. I just like the cooler tones better. But I do want to see if we can get some comparisons from these palettes. So let's start off with the shade Rosewood Romantique from Moonlit Seduction. And I'm going to swatch that against Sienna Mystique, which is the comparable shade. So this is Moonlit Seduction, that is Sunlit Seduction, that is Rosewood Romantique, and this one is called, what's it called? Sienna Mystique. Similar, not the same. I will definitely say that one is cooler, the one from Moonlit Seduction. It's a cooler tone palette, so that makes sense. And then let's look at the shimmers in here. So there's one that's called Blitz Venus. And this formula, again, feels like a newer formula. I think this is in a pan. Yeah, it's in a pan. And it's got that wetness that the shadows in that 5-pan had. And a little bit of the body, not wet, but just like a little bit more texture, a little creamier. That is very similar to what is in this newer palette. So I'm going to swatch these. So first up is Blitz Venus, and then the next one I'm going to swatch, I think this is Astral Pink Fetish. So Astral Pink Fetish is this really bright kind of peachy one from Sunlit Seduction, and then this is the shade from Moonlit Seduction. And what you can see here, even though the shades aren't that similar, is the reflect. You can see the sort of creamy, intense reflect. It is not that sort of scattered, glittery vibe that you often get from her special shades. Because again, this one is another palette that people complained didn't have special enough shades in it. I personally really like this formula. I think it's pretty. This is, of course, the standout shade in Moonlit Seduction, and I'm going to swatch that next to the purple in this one just to see if there's any comparison. No. Again, it's more cool. So this is the one from Moonlit Seduction. This is the one from Sunlit Seduction. This one is more purple. This one has just a bit more shift, a bit more body. My personal preference is the one from Moonlit Seduction, but again, Moonlit Seduction is my preference of the two anyway. Now, let's pull out, and I'm going backwards. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but I'm doing that on purpose. So we're going to start now. We're going to go back to Divine Rose 2. So this is what it looks like. And this one is much brighter than Sunlit Seduction. Like, you can see how much brighter this is. But there are still similar shades, so we're going to get into that. So let's start off with the lighter shade. So we have Skin Show Nude. I'm going to swatch that. Next to Skin Tone Radiance. Skin Tone Nude is from the Divine Rose 2, and Skin Show Radiance is from Sunlit Seduction. So that's the Sunlit Seduction shade. That's the Divine Rose 2 shade. Similar, but you can see even here that the one from Sunlit Seduction has a tiny bit more body to it and a tiny bit more warmth. It's kind of got like, you can't really see it, or maybe you can see it further back. It's got a peachiness to it that the one from Divine Rose 2 does not have. My bad, guys. The shade from Divine Rose 2 is actually called Skin Show Rose Opal. I had the cards mixed up because it's very easy to do that. I really wish she would find some way of printing these and it look nice. I know why she doesn't do it, but it's having these little cards and having to remember to put them in the right palette. It gets a bit obnoxious. So the one that I swatched was Skin Show Rose Opal. Okay. So next up, let's swatch this shade called Divine Dusk. And this is sort of the bronze of the palette. We're going to swatch that next to Hypnotic Bronze. So this is the one from Sunlit Seduction, and this is the one from Divine Rose 2. Let me see if I can get these closer together. These are like all over the place here. There we go. So you can definitely see the difference. The bronze that is in Divine Rose 2 has a bit more rosiness in it, which makes sense. It's a pink leaning palette, even though Sunlit Seduction is as well. That one, I think it's intended to be more red leaning, but a lot of the shades are pink, rosy toned. So you can see that this one just has a bit more rosy pink undertone than the one from Sunlit Seduction. Let's do the shade Eleganza, which I actually really love this shade. It's beautiful. It's like a purple tinted metallic. It's so pretty. And then let's do that up against the Astral, what is this called? Astral Amethyst Allure from Sunlit. So, can you see the difference there? Like, this one is a more traditional metallic, and this one is like a bit more, again, has more body. It's more creamy to the touch. It goes farther when you blend it out. It just feels like you can blend this out for days. It just kind of has way more stretch and body to it. Beautiful shades though. Of these two palettes, which one do I prefer? You know, when I first got Divine Rose 2, I used it all the time and I haven't touched it in ages. So I would say for me, both of these sort of have the same kind of usability factor for me, in that I don't use this palette that much. I have the limited edition packaging though, because it's pretty. All right, and then let's compare it to the one that started it all, baby. Let's talk about Divine Rose 1. Now, I don't think these are going to be that similar because, well, maybe. This is so cool toned in comparison to Sunlit Seduction, you know? It's so cool toned. But, again, there are still shades that have the same sort of DNA. So let's start off with Sable Bronze, the bronze of the palette. And you'll see what I mean when I say, like, I'm actually going to swatch two. I'm going to swatch Lovelace as well, which is kind of a gray tinted bronzy tone, taupey tone. It's more of a taupe, but I want to see what they look like up against each other. Let's take Hypnotic Bronze. And let's sit it next to these two. So can you see? This is the one from Sunlit Seduction, but look how cool these tones are, and that is the bronze. I think this is Sable Bronze, and then this is Lovelace, and these are both from Divine Rose 1. Do you see the difference in tones? Like very, very different as far as the undertones, you know, it's sort of just everything is a little bit more like turned down, cooler. And then let's look at this shade here, this Skin Show Nude shade, which she has used before. And I want to just compare it to Skin Sane Radiance, or what is it called? Skin Tints Radiance, excuse me. So hopefully, I'm trying to wipe everything off, but my hand is like So very similar still. Again, this shade, that sort of like champagne-y shade, you know, always that she always has in her palettes. The tones of them are just all slightly different, but they're not that different, you know. I prefer actually the one from Sunlit. I think the one from Divine Rose 1 is just a tad too cool for me. It can look quite, you can kind of see it just has a bit more white. This one has a bit more peach pink, so it just has a bit more warmth, which works better for my skin. And again, not a lot of comparison. I'm going to swatch Extreme Mahogany because I want to see if the browns are similar. And this is Extreme Vermilion Dusk. No, not at all. Look how warm Extreme Vermilion Dusk is compared to this one, to Extreme Mahogany. Look at that. And that's the thing about Pat, is that her palettes, you'll look at them and you'll be like, they're exactly the same, but there's always some kind of variation. It's just a question of, is that variation enough for you to spend your money? And that's a question you're going to have to answer for yourself. I can't answer that. That's a question between you and your wallet. Now, I have a couple of other palettes that I want to talk about that are not motherships, but I wanted to show them to you guys because they are part of, you know, past collections that I feel like you can, if you have some of these already, you can replicate some of what's in Sunlit Seduction and save your money. So first up, we're going to start off with the 6-pan mothership Rose Decadence. Looks like this. I don't know if this palette is still in stock. I think it's discontinued. But if you have this, I wanted to show you what it looks like. So this is what it looks like. And this was sort of her mini version answer to Rose, Divine Rose 2. So I'm going to hold up Sunlit Seduction and I'm going to hold up this one. So as you can see, this has way more pink in it. But it also has this shade that is called... what is this shade called? I don't even know. It doesn't have names on it, but I'm gonna swatch it because I feel like if you have this shade, now I will say this shade does not have the body of the one from the mothership. It just doesn't. So this is the one from Rose Decadence, and this is the one from the Sunlit Seduction, and this one is called Blitz Crimson Ecstasy. So this is the one from that mini mothership, and this is the one from Sunlit Seduction. So this is Rose Decadence, this is Sunlit Seduction. Do you see what I'm saying? So the one from the mothership, the full size Sunlit Seduction, has way more body, a lot more. Like, and I have that on my eyes. I tapped it on my lids just here with another shade because I didn't want it to overtake the look. The red is pretty, but it's not my favorite shade in the palette. Like, I tend to like the bronzy tone, so I kind of wanted to have a hint of that, while the bronze kind of saved the star. But if you have this palette, you can replicate that shade quite easily. It won't be as intense, but you know, you can get pretty close to that, you know. So let me swatch this other shade in here that I think might work as well. And this one has more orange to it, but I have a feeling that you could still get the same vibe. It just will be more orange based. So this is, why am I holding my arm like, this is the one from Rose Decadence, and this is the one from Sunlit Seduction. Like, if I have this on my lid. So I have this on the middle center of my lid with a little bit of that Blitz Crimson Ecstasy shade right on the top, on the middle of my lid, and brought up a little tiny bit into the crease. But this is what's the majority of the middle of my eyelid. If I had placed this on and blended it out, it wouldn't be that much different. It'd have a little bit more orange, but I don't think it would be that different, you know? So again, if you have this, you can make it work. And you can even make it work by just blending in a brown base, like a brown matte as your base, and going over, you would probably still get the same vibe. Now let's do these sort of mahogany brownie tones. This one I will say probably is a bit more purple than the one from Sunlit Seduction. Yeah. So those are different. But again, you could still make it work. Now let's talk about two other palettes that she came out with. And this one she's brought back a couple of times. I don't know if she'll bring it back again, but this is the Venus in Fleurs Luxe Quad and Voyeuristic Vixen. This is what it looks like. Very pretty. This one does not have the like super red tones, but can you see the vision? Can you see what you can do with this palette, what you can do with that palette? All right, and one thing I will say is if you're looking for that's a special texture, this shade is worth this entire palette. This is the shade, I think it's Rose Fire Nectar. I'm gonna swatch it, it gets everywhere, but it's so pretty. It's gold, and then it's peach, and then it's pink, and then it's just, oh, and it's flaky, and it gets everywhere. And, you know, it's annoying to clean up, but it's beautiful on the eye. That is a stunning shade. So that's one shade that is not, you're not going to get that kind of, you're not getting that kind of dimension. Well, maybe with Astral Pink Fetish. Let's see. I'm going to swatch them both. Whoa. So flaky. So you see how they both have that pink and then they kind of go gold, but this is the one from Sunlit Seduction. It has way more pink in it, whereas the one Fire Nectar has so much more peach and gold. Do you see that? But again, I feel like depending on how close you're trying to get, you could still make this work, you know, like it's not outside the realm of possibility to sort of create a similar vibe. But let's try the bronze in this palette, and this is the shade, I think it's called Twilight Bronze. Yes, let's try that, and then we're going to try Hypnotic Bronze. So Hypnotic Bronze, not samey, really. This one is lighter. I will say I like the texture of the one in the Sunlit Seduction palette better. It's creamier. This one is definitely more cool toned. But again, how close do you want it to be? Or do you need it to be? Moonlight Liaison is the light shade here, and this is quite light. I don't think it's very similar. Well, I mean, they're all kind of similar, let's be real. Do you see what I mean? They're similar. All of these shades are like slightly different. So I would say the one from Sunlit Seduction is definitely warmer. Let's do the browns, because the browns are, this is the shade After Dusk. It's very creamy to the touch. So that's the one from Venus and the Voyeuristic Vixen palette. And this is the one from Sunlit Seduction. Again, her browns and burgundies, they all are like slightly different. Similar, but not the same. Finally, I have this palette, Bronze Borealis. Now, if you saw my review of these palettes when they first came out, and this is from her Holiday 2021 collection. I was not a fan of this palette, but I've kept it because it's one of those basic palettes that kind of come in handy. And I'm really only going to swatch one of these shades here, and that is the shade, I think it's called Sienna Rose, which is actually more, it's a bronze. It's very creamy, my goodness. Okay, and we're going to swatch Hypnotic Bronze. How similar those are. The textures are similar. The tones are similar. I would say that the one in the quad is not as, it's creamy, but it's not as creamy as the one in Sunlit Seduction. It's just not. I can tell that this formulation is just a tiny bit more sophisticated. All right, guys, so that is my in-depth comparison of all of the pinky tones, rosy tones that Mother Pat has released over the past few years. It's a lot, as you can see. She has really, and I don't own all of those palettes. You know, there's a quad that she came out with just this past summer that has those sort of tones in it that I skipped. It was when she came out with her blush balms. I skipped that palette. I didn't need it. As you can see, there's a lot of overlap. There's a lot of samey. There's a lot of like similar but not the same. I want her to move on and I want her to come back to the table with something new, something fresh, something that is exciting to the girls, because this is the thing. The reason why she's making these palettes that are so similar, guys, is because they're selling. It's a company. It's ultimately a business. Their main goal is to make money. That's just a fact. She would not be releasing this many palettes that are this similar if they were not selling. It's as simple as that. If she had sold Divine Rose 1 and Divine Rose 2 and Divine Rose 2 flopped, they would have went back to the drawing board and done something completely different. That clearly didn't happen. I know it didn't happen for me. I bought it. A bunch of other people bought it. A lot of people love that palette. I think it's a good palette. For me, I don't find it quite as usable as like Divine Rose 1. I find Divine Rose 1 to be a bit more approachable as far as usage goes, but it's still a beautiful palette, and it still has shades that I absolutely love and that I reach for. And there are shades in there. There's a shade in there that I like. I think it's called Naked Blush, that I use as a blush. It's beautiful. The quality and the color story, they work, and it clearly sells. And I think what she's doing here is she's trying to find a way to sort of continue to capture those sales from people who love these tones, and just doing slight variations of them. I feel like my lipstick has faded a bit, just a little. I'm wearing Skin Sane 2. I also picked up, finally picked up some of the Satin Allures. I bought the trio. I bought the new trio. And I'm wearing Skin Sane 2. And I have to say I really love it. But I've been talking a lot, so I feel like my lipstick is fading. It's clearly a business choice. It is a calculated business decision to continue to release these palettes. And I think for her and for her brand, it's going to become a question of, will they lose too many customers, or will they, versus what they gain, you know? If they're gaining more customers, then it doesn't really matter. It comes out in the wash, you know, those of us who are like, I don't like it, you know? And also we have to keep in mind that the beauty community is we're in our own little bubble here, in our own little planet. And what we often find exciting is not what the regular makeup buying public is into, you know. They're not into, you know, green metallics. Crazy, I know. They're into, you know, soft browns and like soft pinks and wearable shades and things like that. And so I think what she's doing is sort of putting her finger up to the wind to see which way the wind is blowing, and the wind is blowing to more consumer-friendly products. Whereas I felt before, her makeup was very artistry-driven and artistry-based. Her core audience now is very much veering more towards the consumer luxury person who wants to buy palettes that at $128, they don't want a palette with a blue shadow. They want a palette that has a pretty bronze that they can wear all the time. And that is a valid thing to want. If you're going to have an $128 palette and you don't wear blue eyeshadow, it doesn't make sense for you to spend $128 on a palette. But if it's a palette that has a bunch of wearable shades of good quality, you can justify that. And I think that's where the thinking is going. Very similar to Charlotte Tilbury and where that brand's thinking is going, in the sense of the reason why Charlotte keeps doing Pillow Talk, guys, is because Pillow Talk sells. Like, I just bought the Pillow Talk matte blush. It finally launched on Sephora. I bought it yesterday. I've been wanting to try it. I've never tried anything Pillow Talk, so I'll report back, you know. But the reason why they do it is because it sells. It's simple as that. So we can rant and rave and talk about how boring it all is, but they do it because it sells, and it's really just as simple as that. It's not that deep. It's not that complicated to understand. The question then becomes, we as consumers who are, you know, a lot of us are enthusiasts, are collectors, we spend a lot of money on makeup. We have to start asking ourselves how we feel about purchasing things that are so similar to things that we already own. If you are a collector and you're going to buy everything that Pat McGrath comes out with, live your life, boo. Do your thing. I have no problems with that. I was the same way for a very long time, and I'm still kind of that way, because now I think if I hadn't started my YouTube channel, that probably wouldn't be the case anymore. But I do have a channel now, and so I do purchase things because I want to review them from you guys and give you my thoughts, so that you can kind of have an informed, you know, you can make an informed choice and decision about whether you want to spend your money on it. So I feel like I'm sort of, you know, I'm kind of like a really, you know, OG Pat McGrath enthusiast who has a lot of knowledge about the brand, a lot of knowledge about the formulas, because I own more Pat McGrath than I own of any other brand, literally. And this is even after decluttering some things. I own so much Pat McGrath. I know I've tried pretty much everything, with the exception of a few newer things. I've tried pretty much everything. So I feel like I can come to the table with you, to you guys and give you my opinion. And it's not an opinion that I've kind of like, just pulled out of a hat. It's some years of buying and collecting and using and loving Pat McGrath. So in summation, I want to say that I don't think, if you are not someone who absolutely is in love with this palette and you're not a collector and you're not a Pat McGrath collector, you don't need this palette. It's $128. As you can see, I was able to not completely dupe, but I was very much able to get dupe the vibes of this palette with a million other palettes. So if you have any of these palettes, you can dupe the vibe. You absolutely can. You don't need it. It's not special. That's what I think is the main takeaway with this palette, and why I think the reception from the makeup community was so muted, is that it doesn't feel special. And it's not. It's a beautiful palette. I think the formulas are great. Again, I don't have issues with her formula. I know some people said that they thought the formula was subpar compared to her other formulas. I think it's decent. I think her formula has been tweaked a couple of times depending on the palette. I think a lot of that has to do with distribution. Well, not distribution, but like labs, who she's sourcing her materials for, who's creating the formula for the shadows. We know she gets them from Italy. But I know during the pandemic, there were certain palettes that weren't made in Italy, and I think she sort of created this 2 lines of palettes. So I think you get the ones that are made in Italy, and you get the ones that aren't. I feel like Sunlit Seduction is kind of, I believe it's made in, I can take a look and see. Where was this made? Made in Italy. So yeah, so I think she's tweaked her mothership formula slowly over the years. It's changed, I will say that. But I think part of that is because it has to in a lot of ways. Like, she's done the baked gelée formula a million times. Do I think that it would be nice to see some innovation with that formula? Some like, some interesting other shades other than golds and things like that? Absolutely. But that's her vibe. That's her aesthetic. Like, we're always going to get a gold. There's a gold in this one, guys. It right here. That's a gold. You can't really tell because my finger, the light is not hitting it very well, but that's a bright gold. You're always going to get a brown. You're always going to get a light. Like, this is her formula. This is her way of putting together her palette. So I think that's going to change. No. It just becomes a question of what you're willing to spend your money on. So again, I didn't do a doom up for this because I felt like that has been done a million times. I'm sure you've seen a million looks with this palette. There's not really a lot you can't. I will say it's not a very versatile palette in that way. You're going to get very samey looks. You just are. I think the look I came up with is absolutely beautiful though. I had no problems using this palette. It was super easy. Blended like a dream. I'm happy with how it looks. I'm happy with my makeup today. I used my Givenchy foundation, and I used, a couple of other things. I'll put everything down below. Just so you know, they are affiliate links. So if you click on them, I do get a small commission. Thank you very much if you use them. But you don't have to if you don't want to. But yeah, I did my makeup today, and I'm very happy with my makeup today. So I'm not mad about what I got from the palette, but I also don't think that this is a look that I couldn't replicate with other palettes that I own. Other palettes as well, Like, the red that's in this is pretty, but is it as pretty as the one that's in Bronze Seduction? No. I own Bronze Seduction, so if I wanted that rich, amazing red that's so stunning in that palette, I could use that red and it would actually, I think, be better. Okay? So just, think about what you own. If you are a Pat lover, if you already own the majority of her palettes, if you already own these shades from her, save your money. I mean, holiday's coming up soon. Maybe she'll shock us all and like come out with something amazing and off the wall, and we'll want to spend our dough on that. So just take a moment, and yeah, and hold your funds if you can and if you want to. All right. Yeah, guys, so I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was informative. I hope I was able to sort of help you discern how you feel about this palette, if you still want it, if you don't want it, if I've changed your mind and now you do want it. Let me know in the comments down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye now.